I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery, here to talk with the artists behind American-Born Chinese, which tells the story of a Chinese-American high schooler whose new classmate turns out to be the son of the Monkey King trying to save the heavens from an uprising. We've got the author of the graphic novel and executive producer, Gene Luen Yang, costume designer, Joy Cretin, actor Daniel Wu, and stunt coordinator, Peng Zheng. I'll start with you, Gene. What did you think about the prospect of turning your graphic novel into a TV series? Was it something you were very protective of?
To be honest, in the beginning, I was very hesitant about it. The book came out in 2006, so it's been about 15 years, 17 years actually, since it came out. And in the beginning, I was very hesitant because I felt like I was dealing with some very sensitive themes in the graphic novel, and I was worried about how those would translate onto the screen. Specifically, I was very worried about how this one character, who was kind of the embodiment of all of the negative Asian and Asian American stereotypes that I grew up with, how that character would show up on the screen. And I was worried about how that character, if he ever showed up on the screen, would end up on YouTube, completely decontextualized. So it'd be the exact opposite of what I was trying to do in the book.
And
kind of like what happens with the Freddie Wong character and his meme on in the show, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, that was actually one of the things that convinced me to do it. Kelvin Yu, our showrunner, came up with this what I thought was a really brilliant solution. He took that fear that I had, and instead of telling me that it wasn't going to happen, he just was like, "Let's just make it a plot point," and that's exactly what happens in the very first episode.
And were there elements of the graphic novel that you especially wanted to make sure were preserved and honored in the adaptation?
Well, I really believe that like different storytelling mediums have different strengths. So comics and graphic novels have certain strengths and weaknesses, and television had certain strengths and weaknesses. And what I was hoping for, and I think what happened was the team behind the television series, they really structured everything to take advantage of the strengths of the television medium, of like a serialized medium. You know, I really wanted the spine to be the same. The spine is about a young man who becomes friends with a kid that he's embarrassed of initially, and then he realizes that that kid, there's more to that kid than he thought, and that kid becomes kind of a representative of his relationship with his own cultural heritage. All of that is in the show.
And Daniel, you played the Monkey King, who is fighting to protect the heavens from the bull demon. How challenging was it to balance the mythic qualities of the Monkey King with what's really a down-to-earth story of this complex father-son relationship?
Yeah, it's a quite complex character to play for many reasons. One being that the Monkey King character is so iconic in Asian culture, right? I read somewhere that it's in the DNA of 1.5 billion people, because the Journey to the West story is one of the 4 pillars of Chinese literature. So it's a very important literary source. And so everybody knows that story, everybody knows that character. But what I'm playing is a kind of slightly different version of that character. He's a bit older now. And so we're taking a little bit of liberties and kind of going, what if, you know, Monkey King was a father? What if he was older and he's got these responsibilities now? And what does he do with all that responsibility in terms of how does he raise his son? How is he sees all these elements of his son that are very similar to the way he was when he was younger, and he doesn't like it, but at the same time he wants to let him grow and be his own self, but he also wants to control it. So those things, those elements are very real world, and like I'm actually dealing with that in my real life right now with my daughter. And so, you know, try not to be a tiger dad and try to let her grow and be her own self. And so I think the combination of the fact that I know this character very well from my upbringing, from reading Journey to the West, and then being able to relate to some of the themes that we're trying to present in the show, which is like the father-son relationship and how do you raise a child in these modern times, through this character, was able to like connect those two elements, which is the mystical and mythological to the real world grounded. And so that idea that he's trying to raise his son and his son's run amok, that kind of is the connective tissue which makes both of those worlds work and make the character grounded.
Yeah, and for all of you, these characters are so ingrained in Chinese and Asian culture at large that like did you all grow up with these, references, or were you coming at it new when, Gene, when you wrote the graphic novel, and the rest of you when you were making the series?
I didn't come to it new. I mean, the Monkey King is something. I'm like Daniel, right? I heard about him since before I can remember. My mom would tell me Monkey King stories at bedtime. I think that's true of almost like every Chinese kid on the planet, regardless of what country we actually grew up in.
Because I think the Monkey King, in some ways, his character is very childlike, right? And so that story is very relatable to kids because they're all, we're all naughty little kids growing up, and we're trying to find our way. And so that character is very relatable to young children because they're acting in a very similar way, and they're, being controlled by their parents. And in the Journey to the West story, it's the gods that are trying to control him, right? And so he's trying to find that balance of being himself and appeasing the gods. And I think that's really relatable to kids. For me, it was like not only just in cartoons and movies, but my dad was a big fan of Chinese opera. He practiced Chinese opera himself. And there's a very famous Journey to the West Chinese opera performance that we would watch on videotape all the time. And I never understood what they were saying, but by the physicality of it and the iconic nature of Monkey King himself, like you could figure out what was going on. And I watched that over and over as a kid.
Peng, what was your relationship to this mythology?
Same here. I grew up with that story, with that book, with also a TV show they made about a Journey to the West. I mean, they're like my biggest fantasy story I grew up with. Yeah.
Joy, did you have any relationship to these?
I think I was more familiar with Gene's version than to the actual Journey to the West. So I did a lot of research in prep for this show, and talking to a lot of my crew that grew up with these stories and watching a lot of different versions that have been done. So I learned a lot. I had a lot to learn about a lot of these characters. But there is, like, even in Japanese culture, we have like a similar Monkey King version, and yeah, so I did some research.
The Japanese are super into the Monkey King. Like, there's so many cartoons, manga and anime that are kind of rooted in the Monkey King.
Well, yeah, the most famous being Dragon Ball Z.
That's right.
That is the Monkey King story, the Journey to the West story, for sure.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's like Space Skateers.
Yeah.
There's a Pokemon that is based on the Monkey King. There's just so many. There's a side character in Sonic the Hedgehog. He's like everywhere. And
Joy, doing the costumes on this, you're also balancing the heavenly with the earthly in this series. You mentioned doing a lot of research, and what kind of research and references were you drawing from?
We watched a lot of versions that have been done and tried to pull references that are memorable to people. So we kept something for each character that people that know these iconic characters will still relate and be like, oh, I know who that is. But then try to add modern takes on it and do something new that people haven't seen yet, because there's been so many versions done. And I think that's where having Philip Lim and Prabal Gurung collaborating with these costumes was really helpful, to have something really new and amazing and fresh and modern, and a high fashion take on these characters was something that I don't know has ever been done before.
High fashion, but highly functional, because we had also had to fight in those outfits too.
Yeah.
So everything, like, that was my request, is like, it can look good, but it has to be fun. I have to be able to move in this thing, and I don't want it to hurt me. I've been in costumes before that have like caused me like to bleed or bruise me or scratch me or whatever. So I would warn the guys. I was like, please don't do this to me. And they were great. The costumes were awesome. They were great to fight in, and they look good.
Yeah, I think we did a lot of tests with Peng's team before you even tried it on, just to make sure that we had it in a decent place for you. So there's definitely a lot of tests that went on beforehand.
And what is that collaboration like between you and Peng, to make sure that the costumes are as functional as possible? And what were those tests? Like?
We always start with, we come up with concepts and ideas that that we think would look cool and would make sense. But we always have to keep in mind what is functional. And so even if it's like a shoe, I like to start with that, because that's always super important, that they're safe and can move, and so we always go and test those first before we put it into the illustration and make it final and people fall in love with the look. So we're always running back and forth to the stunt department and having them test out different pieces. And so I really get to know those guys, and we work really closely. And I think that's something that we did on Shang-Chi as well. So having the same team come over was so much fun we already had this great collaboration process that we could just continue. So it was pretty seamless.
I was actually especially appreciated. So in episode 4 is like probably the weirdest episode in the whole season. And it's because the whole thing is like this homage to the series.
Directed by Peng, by the way.
Yeah, it was directed by Peng. And the whole thing is like this really loving homage to the series that Peng mentioned earlier, that aired in Asia in like the 80s, right, Peng?
Yeah, the 80s.
Yeah, so I just felt like that the look of that whole episode really balances this like loving homage to like the 70s 80s version of the Monkey King with like a modern sensibility. It's just super fun to look at. That whole episode.
Yeah, and it made a lot of sense because it's a flashback, right? So kind of make it go old school and look old school, like 70s 80s style. Like it was very appropriate for the actual scene it was in.
Yeah, and that episode is such a showcase for everyone's work. Peng, as the director, does your stunt experience, stunt coordination experience, does that come into play as a director? Does that inform your work behind the camera?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Are you talking about the episode 4? Yeah. Well, actually, it's quite a challenge for me for this one. And I think once I read the script, this episode has no action. Yeah, but the story I was very familiar in. Like Monkey King in the Heaven story is one of the early story I read for Monkey King, which the moment I really love it. And it's in a very different way to tell that story. I think that challenge gave me a lot of positive energy. It was a great story.
I could see a lot of his action sensibility, even though there wasn't much action in the scene, but like just the way he chose shots and like doing like Steadicam 1 shots or big crane shots to kind of create this regal atmosphere and to get the whole kind of setting in the shots. Like it was very kind of action oriented, even though there wasn't action in it. And I think that sensibility created this kind of new dynamic or interesting dynamic for that episode.
There was some action. Daniel got to beat up like a giant peach. He just beat
the
crap
right.
out of this peach.
I gotta smash a peach.
That's right.
I love watching Peng direct because he's always like running in and out. Like you can tell he's figuring out all these like things that we're like, what are you doing? And then it just turns into this amazing new shot that nobody else would have thought of. But I spent so much time on set just because I really enjoyed watching that episode he made.
Thank you.
And I imagine that episode was especially busy for the costume department because it's such an extravagant set of looks that are coming into that party. What was that episode like to work on, Joy?
We actually started working on that during prep in the very beginning. That was like something that was always like looming over us. Like, we have to figure this out. We have to get this right. It has to be amazing and something new. And we had the photos from Gene's book, the art of his depiction of heaven, which was really colorful. And we knew we wanted to do that versus just more ethereal and white and gold. And we wanted it to be really vibrant and feel like a real party and have all of these gods and goddesses really dressed up. But we weren't sure. We wanted to be really respectful of who they are and what, like, how far we can really push the costumes. So it was this balance the whole time of trying to figure out how much tradition we should keep and how modern we could go. but I think we were given the opportunity to really like play and create things that were new and exciting and kept elements still. We made a lot of robes and collars and things that could add touches of tradition to the modern costumes. So I think we found a nice balance. But it was very fun. It was a lot of work, but it was super fun.
It was pretty stressful. I think the VFX makeup department, they're very stressed out. There's
Yeah.
so many people in prosthetic makeup. It was kind of cool to walk around set when we were filming that, because it was kind of like, you know, that scene in Star Wars when they walk into the bar and like you see all the different kinds of aliens. Like this was our version of that. So you got to see all the kind of mythical beings that exist in heaven, and there's so many kind of freaky deaky looking people
Yeah,
all over the place. It was cool. It was a very cool week or so filming that.
That was also my favorite episode to watch Daniel perform in, because I had only seen you as this really like regal, sleek, confident, serious dad, Monkey King. So then when I saw you and Leonard, I was blown away.
Well, I was really glad that they wrote that episode, because like when I accepted the project, I only saw 1 through 3, I think. And you know, playing a different version of an iconic character, which is like he's more subdued, he's older, he's more mature. I was afraid that there would be a negative reaction to that, because like that's not the Monkey King we know. So with having episode 4 and able to flash back and show that side, you know, and then show that he's changed over time was really important for my character. Like it was really, really important. And I was so relieved that we got to show that, because then it kind of appeases the people who know Monkey King inside and out. But it also informs people who don't know about him, like his journey and the path he's made in life and where he's at now versus where he was before. So it was really important for my character development for that episode.
Yep. And I think when you watch it, especially as I mean, as a Chinese American, and I'm assuming as an American of any background, there's like a certain weirdness to it, right? Like a certain unfamiliarity to it. And I think that feeling is kind of how like a lot of us immigrants kids feel about our parents' cultures. You know, like the discomfort that you feel when you watch that particular episode, it mirrors something about like the themes of the show.
Mm.
Like Jin Yang looks weird, dude. Like when you look at him, he's like he
Jin
might be the
Yang?
weirdest dude. Yeah, he might be. I mean, I'm not saying. Oh, I don't mean Jin Yang like normally looks weird. Although I was talking about him specifically in that episode.
Oh,
yeah.
That was 6 hours of prosthetic makeup for that guy.
Yeah,
I felt so bad for him.
I didn't even recognize him the first time on set.
I mean, he's literally unrecognizable completely.
Yeah, he really is.
Like,
he really
not
is.
at all like what he normally looks like, and even the personality of the character is not all like.
Yeah.
So that was cool for him.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people didn't even realize Key was in that episode.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. That was
that's
a
right.
secret. Playing 2 characters, playing Guangong, the god of war.
Yeah.
And visual effects are such another big part of the show, bringing it to life. Peng, what was it like creating these fight scenes and then having them interact with these visual effects? Obviously, something that you've done before in your career.
Well, this show for me is actually action-wise is quite a challenge, because Monkey King and the Journey to the West, the story, we also watch so many different versions, and the magic, the elements, and our show, the story is very different. It's actually, after I talked to Destin, I said, wow, what are we gonna do? And we have to make the traditional Monkey King story much more grounded and also happen in the modern time. We have to come up like some new ideas. People still familiar with the Sun Wukong's power, Newmo Wang's power, but in the very grounded way. We have to do a lot of tests to make sure the action fits to the story, fits to the modern world. You can't just do a whole bunch of magic fight. I know we did it. I wish Jin, Daniel, everybody likes it. And I was a little worried, what are we doing?
It was cool though, like for example, the staff, the Jingu Bang that my son steals from me, and fighting with that, and fighting with all these different versions of it, because obviously it can be really small, it can be really big, it can be humongous. So for us, practically, when we're filming these fight scenes, we have to be clear which version of the staff we have, because when Jimmy first pulls it out, it's small. Then we start fighting with it. Then later, when Michelle comes down, the goddess of mercy comes down, it becomes like a toothpick and it goes in his ear, right? So we had so many different versions of that staff to fight with, and we had to keep that all clear in our head because it would transform with the visual effects later, obviously. But just to keep on track of like, what are we, okay, wait, this is big staff, little staff, what are we fighting with right now, you know? Or is this the soft one that can hit me with, or is this the metal one that you can't hit me with, you know? There's so many different versions of it, and like it's a fine balancing act to have to, you know, take care of the action for Peng, but also be clear about what it's going to be in the visual effects.
I really love the way Peng was able to express character through the fight choreography. You know, like for example, in episode 5, there are 2 fights between Wei-Chen, you know, Daniel's son, the Monkey King's son, and Jigong, who's like this classic Chinese character. He's like the mad monk. He's sort of like a drunken. He's a drunken monk, but he's also a really wise character in legend. And some of my favorite, like those 2 are 2 of my favorite fights. Like the way he got Ronnie to fight. Was that, how much of that was actually Ronnie?
I think it's a lot of
A
them.
lot?
The wire work wasn't him, but most of the fighting is him.
Like the actual punching was him? That guy knows how to throw a punch?
Yeah.
Ronnie's a martial artist.
No way.
He trains jujitsu and Wing Chun.
Wow.
Doesn't talk about it much, but he's been doing it for quite a few years now, so he can move. He can move a little bit.
Yeah, especially the first fight is all him.
Really? In the basement? That was all him?
Yes.
Yeah, the way you had that stop, right, where he's like
Right,
gonna
he
lean
just-
back. That was so
yeah,
good.
so
That was
cool.
so
Yeah,
good.
I like taking that kind of classic drunken style and putting it in that character, and then combined with like the way the camera moved around him when he's like drunk and stuff like that. That was really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, Peng comes from the school of like, you know, Chinese cinema, where the action is very important in terms of telling the story and what it means to the characters, right? And so each fight scene is not just a cool looking fight scene, but you learn something about the character through that fight, right? And so, for example, the first fight scene with me and my son, you know, he's not trying to kill the guy, it's his own son, right? He's just trying to get that staff back. So that whole fight is a different dynamic because he's not trying to injure him. It's also telling the story about father and son, and like when the son becomes powerful enough to actually become a challenge for the dad, right? Like in real life, there was those moments when you realize your son can kick your ass now, you know, or, you know, and it's a real reality that you have to face. And so I think that scene talks about that without talking about it in dialogue. It just does it in through the fight, you know. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about Chinese action, is that it always informs you about what the characters are doing. It's not just a fight for fight's sake.
And how much of the stunt work did you do yourself, Daniel, and you know, and the other actors? And you mentioned Ronnie did so much of his own work. Like, how much of that is the actors, and how much of that is the stunt teams?
I would say 90%. Like I did all the fighting stuff. Anything that was like getting slammed through a wall or slammed on the ground, I'm not doing that. I'm sure I'm still over that.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't do the stunt, I do the fight. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
like,
I remember the first sequence is only the slamming to the wall. We have to use double because we don't want to hurt Daniel, and also the costume, everything is gonna get so dirty. We have to use a double, but he did everything else.
but it's
And
fun. I always enjoy it. I enjoy that physical aspect of filmmaking and making a fight scene that, you know, you spend hours and hours on, and then maybe it's only, you know, 1.5 minutes or 2-minute fight. But the detail that goes into each and every shot. And what I also love about, you know, Chinese style action is that the camera is really important in all of it. And the camera moving around the fight like it's a third person within the fight is very different than, you know, I worked on other Western productions where they just do coverage, you know, it's wide, medium, tight, and then the editor puts the fight together. So there's like 3 different groups going on. Whereas in our style of fighting, you know, Peng is the mastermind. So he's not only choreographing the fights, but he's also directing the camera movement. And then he has control of the edit in the end, right? And so all of it comes from one person's mind instead of three people disjointed trying to make something that looks dynamic and looks cool on screen. But it's something that comes from Peng himself, and it's all thought out and planned out before we even shoot it. So while we're shooting each shot, we know exactly what it's for and where it's going to go in the sequence of edit.
And Gene, I understand that these fight scenes, how many of them come directly out of the graphic novel and were inspired directly by images there?
So I think there are 3 fight scenes in the book, and like I said, like that's one of the things about moving a story from a graphic novel to a television series is you really want to take advantage of the television series. There's no such thing as movement in a graphic novel, right? You're kind of faking it. You're using still images and you're trying to create movement inside of the reader's head. But with a television series, you can actually show movement. There's actual real movement that's happening on the screen. So I think that's why the show leans so heavily on action, especially since we have somebody like Peng who can express character through punches and kicks. Like Kelvin and everybody involved in the show really wanted to lean in on that.
And Peng, how was it to have that material, that source material, the graphic novels, to kind of inform your work?
So, well, like when I read the book, it gives you an idea. Of course, you still have to keep a lot of traditional the elements in the action, but it give you an idea what we have to make the action for happening in high school for the kids here. So yeah, that's just the guideline we have to understand it.
And Kelvin Yu is the creator and showrunner of the series. What was it like for each of you to work with him, and what do you think he brought to this story? We can start with Gene.
Oh, he's a jerk. No, I'm just kidding. No, Kelvin and I. No, Kelvin.
The worst
Kelvin and I,
showrunner ever.
Yeah. Yeah, he made me bring him coffee and then feed it to him every time we hung out. No, I'm just kidding. Kelvin and
smell my hair every day.
Honestly, honestly, one of my favorite parts about this project is becoming friends with Kelvin. I came away just really admiring him, both as a creator and as a person. And I felt like for the last 2 years, I've just watched him pour his heart and his soul into this show. Like any kind of feeling that you get in the show, I think when you're watching, these 2 boys navigate their friendship, when you're watching Jin, the main character, dealing with a crush, all of that is pretty rooted in Kelvin's life. He pulled very heavily from his own experience to fill out the spine that he got from the book. And I also realized, like, showrunning is a terrible job. It's horrific. You know what I mean? Like, compared to being a graphic novelist, there was this one point I remember Kelvin had, like, he had to be on set, and then he was also working on a script, and he was working on a rewrite, and he had COVID, like, all at the same time. So it was like, I was just shocked. I was shocked.
And on
I was
top
shocked
of
that was a job, right?
We're also running into his office every hour with a costume question, and he's like, "Sure, let's talk about it," even though I have 1,000 other things on my plate.
Yeah, I think Kelvin was amazing because really to have adapted this graphic novel, which was just quite a challenge. It's like a very good graphic novel, but it's not necessarily screen ready.
Mm-hmm.
And the elements that he added, like the whole family thing, the mother and father relationship, and that relationship to the main character Jin, like that wasn't really spelled out in the book, but he made that so real and so relatable that it just grounds the whole show, right? And then the show becomes about family. It's not just about Asian American identity, but it's about family, and then that makes it a very universal theme. So it's not just this Asian American story, but it's a story that almost everybody goes through of trying to find identity and growing up in a high school, right? But then there's like the comic beats, and I think there's much more comic beats in it than the original book also had as well. And I think that's also like the secret sauce in the show, is that there's a lot of humor and a lot of levity in the things that we're talking about. And so it makes it very easy easy to watch. It's not heavy at all, even though we're talking about some serious themes and all. And I think that combination and that balance really kind of brought the show to life. And I think, it's a shame that Kelvin can't be here because of the strike and all that stuff, but he really deserves a lot of credit for making the show what it is.
I think the
mhm.
biggest thing he gave me and my team was a really safe space to just have the freedom to create and throw ideas around, and we just felt really free. And the collaboration was like so amazing with every department, and I think that came down from the space that Calvin created for us. So I adore him.
Yes, the same here. He supporting our team very much and gave us the freedom to do to do our imaginations. Really enjoy working with him.
And he did it all with a smile all the time. He's always smiling and happy and loose, and there was no crazy seriousness or anger fits or anything like that. It was always calm and fun. I mean, working on this show in general was fun because he set the tone for it.
And it's unfortunately not common to see a story about Asian American characters, or even Asian characters in general. Let alone with so much Asian representation behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. Was it exciting to work on a project like a Hollywood project with so many views well represented like that?
I mean, this is my first experience with Hollywood. My only experience with Hollywood is where there are just Asians everywhere. I don't know what it's like anywhere else. Yeah. That's when I close my eyes and I imagine Hollywood now. I just imagine Asians everywhere.
Yeah, Gene's got a very skewed existence. I think the rest of us had very different experiences. For me specifically, like I worked in Asia for 20 years, and so I knew what it was like to work on a fully Asian project. But then being an outsider as being an American, I'm slightly different than everybody else. I have a different background, different things, life experiences and all that stuff. And then language, being another thing. And then coming back to the States, working on other non-Asian projects, I'd be the only Asian person on set, or I'd be on set and I'd see like one Asian crew member, and we kind of see each other and kind of give each other a nod and eventually find each other for a conversation. But again, feeling like an outsider. And so this is the first time I worked on a production in my 25 years in this business where I felt like this is like a family. This is like my family. Everybody has similar backgrounds, similar upbringing, but also very different. And then everybody is from different departments, whether you're behind the screen or in front of the camera or whatever, all came on different journeys to this point, right? And everyone's at their kind of peak power. And so we're joining forces, I keep saying, it's like Voltron, we're Voltroning together and doing this awesome project. And we all knew what was kind of at stake here, that we had to do a good job and knock it out of the park. So everyone's putting their best foot forward. So the energy level was just like really, really high. And I've never really seen that on a set before. Never felt that kind of warmth, but also that kind of energy of like, we need to kick ass on this thing. And it was just loose and fun, but also serious at the same time.
Exactly.
And one thing that's interesting about the show that I don't think anyone could have foreseen was, how, Michelle Yeoh, Kiwi Kwan, Stephanie Hsu, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, having the year it had leading up to this show where they're all featured as well. What was it like watching that journey of that film, with, not just your co-stars, your co-workers in that, but also the fact that a film with Asian leading cast won the Oscar for Best Picture, this Asian American story. Daniel, what about you?
And it was amazing to be part of that and see their journey and just see how it ended up for them. Because when we started working on this, I don't even think the film had come out yet. So no one knew what was going to happen, right? So awesome to see Michelle's journey and Key's journey, but also Stephanie too, being a new actress and getting that honor so early in her career. so amazing for all of them, and just to be peripherally part of it and be a bystander and watch it happen to them is like so amazing, so amazing.
And what do you each of you hope that that audiences take away from this series now that it's out there and people have a chance to see it? Gene?
Well, first I hope they have fun. I hope it's a fun series to watch. You know, I think it has great fight scenes. I think it has great heart. It has a lot of humor because of Kelvin and his writer's room, and it also has, like, I would say a budding star from Taiwan in Jimmy Liu. I've been kind of shocked at the amount of love that Jimmy Liu has been getting online.
The
And
kids
part
are
of the,
amazing. The kids are amazing in the show. They're like the
yeah,
heart
they really
of the
are.
show,
They
and
really
just
are.
knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, Ben and Sydney are also really awesome as well. But I think you know, like the popularity of Jimmy Liu almost mirrors the themes of the book. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, an Asian American kid growing up in the 80s, I could not imagine like a kid who kind of looked like me, or at least my cousin. Like Jimmy kind of looks like he could be my cousin, becoming like a teen idol, you know? And he's kind of becoming that online now. He's kind of becoming a teen idol. So it speaks to the fact that the things that you are embarrassed of, the things that you hate, might actually be more valuable than you first thought. And that's what I hope. That's what I hope people get when they watch the show, that they look at the parts of their own lives that they might feel embarrassed about, and they realize that there's value in that.
I think growing up, just the word weird was always like the worst thing I could hear. Like, oh, you're a homeschooler, you're so weird. And so I was always like, I'm so different. And I hope that can be turned into a positive after watching this show, and like just embracing your weirdness and how you're different and how cool that is. I hope that kids can change their mindset about that.
Daniel?
I think Ben put it really succinctly by saying, like, he wished he had this growing up, because he grew up in, where did he grow up in?
Minnesota,
right?
Yeah.
He grew up in Minnesota. He wished he had this growing up because he wouldn't have felt as alone. Like when I heard him say that, I was like, yeah, man, like all of us who didn't have representation growing up, you know, to see this, see yourself on screen and see that, like, you're not the only one going through this. And it's not even just an Asian thing. Like every kid that's growing up in high school is going through some kind of identity crisis, right? And they're trying to figure out who they are and trying to fit in and trying to, you know, discover things in life. And it's a terrible time, right? And it can feel really lonely and scary. And so a show like this, I think, hopefully will bring some kind of warmth to kids and make them not feel alone.
Bang?
Well, my both kids saw the show, and they give me a thumbs up. And that's a moment I feel like, wow, I finally did something I can actually show them. I think they're very proud. That makes me very proud. And they're actually playing the show at their class for 2 episodes a day, my son. And then he told the teacher his father did this, and now he has kind of so yeah, I mean, I'm just so proud to be part of this. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Well, I want to congratulate everyone here for your work on this show. So excited that people are getting to see it now, and it's been a pleasure talking with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel, for having us.
Thank you, Daniel.